Okay, so hello Simon, thank you so much for coming. So can you just tell us a bit about yourself and tell us a bit about why you started learning Chinese?
So I'm from a small town in Wales called Holyhead. Basically, the reason why I started learning Chinese is because literally one day when I was like in a park somewhere, I came across someone who was speaking Chinese with his Chinese friend.
Yeah.
And I just thought how amazing that was. So like, I thought like if you could speak a foreign language, like it would just be so awesome.
Yeah.
So basically from then I just decided to start learning Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And how did you go about learning Chinese?
Well, to begin with, I basically just went down the kind of conventional route of like textbooks. So I remember I went to Amazon and bought like HSK1, like most people do.
Yeah.
And I was reading it for a while, but I think maybe after a few pages I just kind of lost motivation, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah.
But then after that, like I suppose like maybe 6 months after like starting that kind of journey, I was just looking on YouTube and came across your videos. Like I'm sure everyone has. Yeah, the interview with Rita, and basically from then, like the amount of motivation that gave me to use like some of your methods and focus on using Anki was quite meaningful. So I just started using Anki.
Oh no, that's so kind of you to say that. Thanks. So what did that look like for you? So from then on, you started using Anki and these kind of methods. What were you actually doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, to start with, I was obviously having to like add the the new kind of word that I've learned from like speaking with my Chinese friends. And then kind of after that I'd add the English translation and the pinyin. But to be honest, after a while I realized how kind of ineffective that was, mainly because when I'd review a card, I would just like kind of memorize the character, but I wouldn't really focus on the tones.
Okay, yeah.
So kind of after that I realized I should probably focus on the tones a bit more. Because I remember one time when I was actually meeting up with one of my Chinese friends, like I was trying my best to speak Chinese, but she was just like, what? And I realized why, because she kind of told me like, your tones are all over the place. Which kind of emphasized to me like how important tones are in Chinese.
Yeah.
So kind of from there on, I added like Anki has a function where you can add like text to speech or like an audio file. So I would just kind of every time I'd learn like a new sentence or a new word, I'd just like use this add-on to kind of add that audio. And from there I'd kind of like imitate the person speaking, so I could kind of train my tones and also my pronunciation. And I'd also add the pinyin, and if I didn't know the pinyin, I would just say I can't do this card. Which I think is very, very important for this kind of thing.
So you're really harsh on yourself with the pronunciation.
Very strict.
One of the things I didn't ask you in our Chinese interview, which by the way guys, if you haven't checked out, you can go and check that out as well. Check out Simon's awesome Chinese. So what did you actually learn, like the tongue positions etc. for like pinyin, or how did you go about actually, do you know what I mean, like from the so there's a gap between like being able to imitate, like for example on hyper TTS on Anki well, and then being like a beginner where like it's like way too fast and you can't keep up with the hyper TTS and it sounds like crazy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean. Basically for that, I think my first couple of months of learning Chinese, I didn't even know that the tongue position existed. But then I realized like how important they actually are, because if you try to pronounce the word or imitate someone but you don't have the tongue positions, then it just won't work very well. So I definitely recommend that to anyone who's kind of struggling with pronunciation, is to look up those kind of they have charts that show like the kind of tongue position and what you should do for each kind of initial and final. I think that's very important. Yeah.
So did you go about yourself like kind of training initials and finals? Would you say, or?
Yeah. If I could find any of those like pictures that showed like the like mouth positions, I would like learn all of those.
You learn, okay, so you learned them, and then did that make the TTS, the imitation of that, a bit easier, would you say?
Yeah, because I realized like, oh, I can actually pronounce these words correctly now.
Yeah.
And it was because I wasn't using the correct, mouth positions before.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. Nice. So you started with HSK.
Yep.
And then you were like, oh, probably not for me. And then you came across my videos, which I'm really happy about. Oh, that's made my day. And then what kind of things did you actually do? So we've talked about using Anki and training pronunciation. What did you do in terms of actually like learning to speak and learning to listen in Chinese, for example?
For speaking, I think the main thing was just using some like language exchange apps. So there's two quite popular ones, which are HelloTalk and Tandem. I used HelloTalk personally, but both work very well. And basically from there, I just like find some Chinese friends to practice with. They kind of try and teach me pronunciation wherever they could, but obviously that didn't always go well.
Yeah.
For listening as well, they'd sometimes send me voice messages. But I think the best thing to do is to just kind of listen to lots of podcasts, to be honest.
Yeah.
Mainly because a lot of the podcasts out there are like aimed at beginners. So that will kind of, help you to get used to all these like different expressions, different phrases and stuff. Yeah. So I think there's quite a few out there. I started quite late in my listening, so I actually used 大树中文 and also...
Wow, you went straight to like 大树中文. That's really cool.
Which I probably wouldn't recommend, to be honest. I'd definitely start earlier with like, Chinese pod or some simpler ones like that. And if you're more advanced, you can use 狗熊有话说. I think those kinds of podcasts are really helpful, to be honest, for listening.
Definitely. I think with things like 大树中文 and 狗熊有话说, like they're still slow enough and like clear enough that like as an intermediate, you'd probably be fine and get a lot out of it. Like I think when I started learning Chinese, like 大树中文 wasn't around. And I think I was similar to you, like I just dived straight into podcast. Like I suppose I didn't even know they were beginner podcasts at the time, so I just went straight for 狗熊有话说. And I was quite lucky that I had found that, because that was like, I suppose he speaks very slowly for a native speaker. Like, no offense to him, I don't think he'll ever watch this video. He's a great guy. I think he's got some really like he's honestly great podcasts. About a wide range of topics, but he does speak quite slowly and clearly, so that I'd really recommend that as well. Cool.
One thing I would say though is for that podcast, I actually went into that podcast first, but I was at that point I was still like a beginner. So some of the vocabulary he uses is quite advanced sometimes. That's true. Definitely don't go for that one first.
Don't go for that one first. Like definitely, now that there are beginner kind of podcasts available, intermediate podcasts available, like make use of that bridge, I'd say. Would you reckon, to kind of build up to native content?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So how did you actually go about using Anki, apart from the Hyper TTS? Like what kind of cards did you use, etc.?
So on Anki you can have like a few types of cards. I think the main one I use is close cards, where you can like you can have a like blank in the middle, and then you can fill that in with a like a new word or phrase or something. So I'd mainly be using that. And when I was doing this, I wouldn't have any English on the back. But that's more of a recent thing, to be honest. I think when you just start out, you definitely have to have the English, otherwise, it just won't make sense.
It's going to be difficult as a beginner to like, because I've talked a lot on this channel and a lot of interviews that I've had about thinking in Chinese, which I think is an important thing. but I also get a lot of backlash from people saying like, oh, but you can't do that as a beginner. I think, to be honest, they're probably right? Like you're not gonna be able to put like Chinese definitions on the front and learn in Chinese from the beginning. But I think what's really cool about what you did is you actually made an effort to try and make that transition, didn't you?
Yeah, I think definitely pushing yourself outside that kind of comfort zone will also be like massively beneficial. Because I remember at the start, you know, when I was speaking with my Chinese friends, I would just not like send voice messages or call them, just because of how bad my oral Chinese was.
Yeah, same.
But, I think that's normal, and everyone should just try to kind of get over that barrier kind of slowly, even if it's just like a short messages, you know, like saying, "Oh, good morning."
Exactly, definitely. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's so easy to get stuck in this silent period for the whole of your life. Like you learn Chinese and then you never actually, because you're just so scared of speaking. But at some point, you do have to just, once you've kind of got out of that comfort zone, like it's a lot easier, isn't it? A lot of it's a kind of mental barrier as opposed to like, oh, my Chinese is actually bad. It's just a case of like, I have to get over that initial embarrassment, and then it will be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And then how about reading? How have you been working on your reading?
Reading for me, I suppose I did go about it in a kind of conventional way to start with, by using the Chinese Breeze. They've got a series of books, and I definitely recommend them to anyone who wants to kind of practice their reading skills. Then on top of that, I also use like Chinese social media apps. You can try and download a few like Xiaohongshu or, you know, Bilibili. I think these two are the main ones.
Definitely.
From these, like, you know, you can just like scroll through like various posts and just, you know, practice and see how much you can understand of each post. Also with this, you know, you can learn those kind of more colloquial phrases. I think it's quite important for that because, you know, a lot of the people you probably meet when you're going through your Chinese learning journey will be like young people. So I think, you know, learning a bit of slang or something like that will definitely be helpful.
Definitely, especially if you're living in the UK and you're trying to learn Mandarin. Like a lot of the people you might meet to practice Mandarin are going to be like students that have come over to the UK to study. So in that case, like learning some slang, learning like kind of keeping up with like the 网络用语, like this kind of online internet slang is probably a good idea to understand what people are saying when they start using them. Cool. All right. Have you got any final advice, would you say at all, Simon, for any Chinese learners out there?
I think the main one is definitely just emphasizing the tones as much as you can. Because, you know, as English speakers, we don't really have this concept of tones, do we?
No.
So I think if you can kind of get in the mindset of how, you know, a Chinese native speaker kind of understands the language, you know, by hearing tones, it'll make it so much easier for you in the long run. Because if you understand that importance, then you'll be able to have much smoother conversations, and you know, they won't have to like stop you and ask like, what are you saying?
Definitely. I think that's a really good point. It's actually led me, sorry, I know that was going to be my final question, but it's not. Like I get a lot of people saying to me like, oh, I know how important tones are, but I'm really struggling because I'm spending all my time, like I'm thinking so hard about the tones that I can't speak fluently, or like I can't. So did you find that at some point, like once you had done enough tone training, that you no longer had to think about them as much? Just for people out there, like give them a bit of hope.
To be honest, at the start, like I could not connect the tones together at all. I had to really think about it so much. So it is completely natural. Don't worry about that part. But you know, after you use like Anki or whatever review software, after quite a while, it will just become like very natural and like second nature to you. Especially as well, you can learn the like the rules for tone changes. That'll also help these sentences to kind of flow more smoothly.
Definitely. Because I find it really interesting when I try and teach people the tone changes. Like you actually find, like I don't know about you, like once you've like for example, I previously didn't know a tone change, for example. And then once I learned it, it was like, oh, that actually sounds a lot better. Like it's actually a lot easier to pronounce it with that tone change. So like, I think, knowing these will actually not only make your Mandarin sound better in that you'll be more native, like because you're not making mistakes, but also it's going to help it flow better, as you're saying, and make it a bit easier. All right. Thank you very much for that, Simon. It's honestly been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. All right, that's the end of this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, let us know what you think in the comments below. Hopefully that's been really useful. It's been really useful for me. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care for now. Bye bye.